And I'm Keandra.
And today we're going to focus on health and beauty. Each year, plenty of women spend ridiculous amounts of money on products that promise to grow their hair and make their nails strong and make their skin beautiful, but we never actually get to the root of what's actually causing these problems. That's what today's show is all about. We have a very special guest here with us today, Mr. Oscar Hines. He's going to introduce all of these wonderful products to you guys, and hopefully there's some interest.
And we're back. We're here with Mr. Hines. How are you today?
I'm doing fabulous.
Awesome, awesome. I see you have a lot of wonderful products here.
Yes.
Can you explain some of them to us and maybe what inspired you to come up with the product?
Sure, sure. Well, you know, in our earlier conversation, and actually, Janitra mentioned the fact that a lot of times we try to get to the root of what's happening with someone's hair, and there's so many products out there. It's confusing, and it's frustrating for the average woman who says, "Well, what should I use?" And then you get a product that says, "Well, your hair is breaking, so you need to put some grease or oil or something like that on." But here's the problem with that: most greases and oils, most moisturizers in general, if you take a look at them, you're going to see something on the label, either petrolatum, which is petroleum, just like grease. You're going to see glycerin, glycerol stearates, which are particles of plastics that actually coat the hair's cuticles. And unfortunately, that's exactly what it does. It coats the cuticle, but it doesn't penetrate through the hair into what we call the cortex. Now, the cortex accounts for about 75% of the strength of your hair. So if you've got something that you coat, obviously it's not going to penetrate, it's not going to stop the breakage, and there's going to be some issues with it. So that's what 80% of the products out there will do. So in our research, and I started in the hair business about years ago. You see the gray hairs, you already know. It was well over 20 some odd years. And when we did, one of the very first things we wanted to do was try to identify something that would really penetrate the hair to stop breakage, so that we could have something much more effective. And through experimentation, we learned about what was called molecular weight. And if you can think about molecular weight, just like, let's say, a petroleum molecule being 4,800, that's like taking a bowling ball and trying to put it through a tennis net. It physically cannot go through.
Right.
Now, if you took a marble and you put it through a tennis net, it would slide right through. Well, that's the difference between a heavy oil and a light oil. And that's what our research showed us. So we found an oil system that actually consists of a very, very light molecular weight. This is called Supergrow Essentials. And the Supergrow Essentials actually serves 3 different, very specific purposes, which are very exciting for a lot of ladies that are having these various issues. First of all, as a moisturizer, it penetrates through the hair's cuticle. So when it penetrates, it's going to get into the cortex, as I mentioned, strengthen the hair to stop the breakage and to stop the dryness. So when you touch your hair, it's not greasy to the touch. It absorbs right in the hair. It's soft, it's shiny, it's silky, but it doesn't have that greasy, oily feel. You remember back in the 80s with the jerry curls, you lay on a pillow.
Or even just to get your hair pressed. My mom would use so much grease on my hair, but see, I've always been told that that's not always good because it clogs the hair, the pores or the follicles or something, and it stops it from growing.
Correct. You hit it right on the head. So there's a very, very important second component, and you just touched on it. When you use a lot of greases and oils, we know that 70 to 80% of the heat escapes from out through our head, through our scalp. Well, it melts down all this oil and it settles on the epidermis, and that starts to attract dust, dirt, pollen, bacteria, and it's like a petri dish. Anytime you have a heated environment with bacteria, you are essentially asking for some type of bacterial growth because they thrive in that environment. So in effect, when you have that on the scalp, a lot of women will start experiencing itching, flaking, Sometimes they'll see hairs that are coming out with a little white tip at the end.
I've seen that.
Seen that?
I have that sometimes.
Really? Now, there's two different ways, so let's differentiate it. And for our viewers as well, it's very important to differentiate. When you comb your hair, you might see a small translucent bulb. If you do, that's normal shedding. Your hair sheds at the rate of about 50 to 100 strands a day. Considered perfectly normal, because as one hair comes out, another one grows back.
Right.
However, if you see a white, fleshy tip at the end of that hair, looks like almost a little piece of skin attached, that's called folliculitis. Folliculitis is where there's a scalp issue. The bacteria had started to erode the dermal papilla, the root of the hair, and that's when the hair comes out. And by the way, I always like to go back and say, you know, I'm a trichologist, and I didn't say psychologist, I said trichologist. That's someone who actually studies hair and scalp. So I'm a hair and scalp specialist, and for our viewers that are wondering, if we get a little technical, that's why. And they're certainly welcome to call or email us with any questions they might have.
Definitely.
But so if you have that fleshy white tip, that's called folliculitis. Now when that hair comes out, oils, greases get back down into the epidermis, it clogs it up, and just imagine a plant where you pull the root out and then you put some kind of cement or glue on it, it will prevent it from growing out. So consequently, you're going to have an issue with hair growing back. So it's progressively going to get thinner if there is a seborrheic dermatitis problem, which is the flaking on the scalp, or a folliculitis problem, which is the hairs coming out from the root. So going back and coming full circle, one of the components we use in the H3 superglue is a component that will kill seborrheic dermatitis on the scalp. We use a product called Melaleuca. It's a white tea tree from Switzerland. It's an antiseptic, antifungal component that's going to kill the bacteria, very, very concentrated. We're also using Egyptian peppermint, as well as a combination of different herbal components that's going to kill the bacteria and help to prevent the seborrheic dermatitis. So you're not only using it on your hair as a moisturizer, you're also using it on your scalp as well.
So could that help for dandruff?
Precisely, and that's exactly what you want to do. There's two aspects, and we're going to talk a little bit more about dandruff too. This is kind of interesting for those listeners that have a chronic issue with what you might call chronic dandruff. Or some people, you know, you go into a certain hair salon, they'll say, "Girl, that's some growing dandruff."
Well,
I hear all the time. It's like growing.
That's not quite the case.
Well, see, I have psoriasis, and a lot of times, I don't have it in my hair, but a lot of times when you go to the dermatologist and you say, "Oh, I have a bad case of dandruff," I've noticed that a lot of people are starting to have the psoriasis in their scalp.
Very true.
Which is causing the dandruff, but it's one of those, they don't know what to do for it.
Precisely, and unfortunately, there are some things that you use for psoriasis that dries out the flaking, but when you put something like that on your hair or scalp, it has highly detrimental effects, because in effect what you're doing is you're drying out the hair while you're drying out bacteria that's exacerbating the psoriasis or the eczema or any of those types of skin disorders that you might have. And many of those components are filled with alcohol or different components that, as you know, are going to be drying agents.
Right.
So one of the things we like about H3 is that when you apply it onto the scalp, it's going to have those antifungal, antibacterial components, but it's not going to create an environment where the hair dries out while it's killing the very bacteria that's causing the problem. So that makes quite a difference. Now there's one more thing I really love about this that makes it really unique, and then we can talk about some other aspects. There's components in here, and one of the components that we have, and people look at the label and they'll say, "What is a phytonutrient?" Because it says it has phytonutrients.
What are phytonutrients?
I'm glad you asked. Well, what's interesting is we take in phytonutrients all the time into our bodies. You see, because our bodies oftentimes will develop various issues with decomposition of the molecular structure, the molecules of the cells of the body. You've heard of antioxidants, and you've heard of free radicals. Well, the free radicals is what deteriorates the cellular structure of the body. So when you take an antioxidant, in effect, what you're doing is you're counteracting the damage caused by free radicals. Another easy or better way to look at it is rust. You've seen things rust, or maybe you've bitten into an apple, and then you look at the apple about 5 minutes later, and you wonder how come it's turning
So
brown.
yeah.
Well, that's because even the air around us oxidizes whatever is in its environment. So oxidation is a process of deterioration in effect. Well, a phytonutrient is an antioxidant. The beauty about this, however, is that when you put it in your hair, there's a couple of different components. Like you'll have people that are thinning, and they're thinning because there's a buildup of what's called DHTs, or dihydrotestosterone, that's growing on the scalp, and it's actually constricting the blood vessels. The constriction of those blood vessels essentially causes the lifespan of the hair to get progressively shorter. So what we do is we apply a phytonutrient, and what it does is it gets rid of the free radicals that is causing that constriction, and it starts to increase the blood flow, essentially lengthening the life of the hair. So what I'm saying in a very technical way is that if you have some thinning issues, you can start to counteract those thinning issues as long as there's an active follicle to stimulate hair growth and restore some of the thinning. And for women that are on high blood pressure medications, hormone medications, there's various steroids that women may have to take for various reasons. Those things can cause thinning. And even for men who have what we call androgenetic alopecia, that's male pattern or female pattern balding, this can help to counteract those issues and keep the hair fuller for a longer period of time. If you followed my genetics, I should be a lot more bald than I am.
So would you say that these products would kind of replace the people who kind of go to the hair club to do the transplants and things of that nature?
The transplants are a very different process. I mean, you're literally taking hair from the back of the head where the hair grows and planting it or putting plots in the front with the idea that it's a skin graft, just like you would graft skin if you were a burn victim. So the processes are different. Of course, the outcome you're seeking is very similar in that you're wanting to try to stimulate hair growth. But for many people, the idea of a scalpel and the removal of parts of your scalp and sewing it or plugging it back in is a little bit scary. So
right.
I would hope this is a little less invasive.
Okay.
That being said, so what we like to do when we really think about using a product is addressing issues not only externally but also internally as well. There's so many people that I talk to that'll say to me, gosh, I'm having this problem with my hair or scalp. It's not growing. What can I put on my hair for it to grow? Well, let's face it, topical things will help. However, the hair grows from the inside of the body. So part of it is what you do internally. So there's a couple of things we might suggest. Like one of them is we carry a vitamin, it's called Ultra 21. It's a very specific targeted vitamin. And by that I mean you'll go to a store and you might see, and I'm sure your viewers will see biotin. You hear biotin everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, biotin is one of the vitamin B complexes, and it's good. But if taken by itself, it does very little. So you want to have a combination of different things. You'll have biotin, you'll have horsetail silica, you'll have lutein, you'll have some of the C complexes in there. And these different components help to feed the hair in such a way where it's the perfect fertilizer, if you will, to stimulate internal blood flow and hair growth. You'll also notice your nails are getting much harder, they're growing faster. And some have said that it has a little bit of a aphrodisiac effect.
Oh gosh, I didn't know you were going to say that. How did I know that?
Well, I couldn't leave that out just in case, that.
For all of our male viewers.
There you go. Get it for your wives, gentlemen. You'll love that. So that's one of the components. But let's go back to something we were talking about just a moment ago, because I think it's very important to also understand when we have a flaking and itching and scalp issue, that is not just a topical solution. You mentioned dandruff just a moment ago. Well, dandruff is a catch-all phrase. The thing about dandruff is that It can be small, fine particles, or it can be white, large flakes that almost look like, the fish flakes that you feed your fish. Are you seeing that? Well, when that is happening and you're scraping that off the scalp and it has a smell and a yellowish cast, all of that are things that are indicative of seborrheic dermatitis. And one of the things I do as a hair health specialist is when I see that on someone's scalp, the next thing I ask them to do is to stick out their tongue. So.
Oh gosh! Oh gosh! A demonstration.
A demonstration.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
I'm not sticking out my tongue.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Of course you will.
So if I see it, and you're welcome to, I'll be glad to take a look at it for you. But if I see certain things on the tongue, it tells me what's happening in the body. For an example, let's say that you have a white coating, a thick white coating on the tongue. That's indicative of elevated levels of what we call Candida albicans. Candida albicans is yeast that's growing in the body. Now, there's a way you can test it. You can get a glass of water in the morning before you brush your teeth and just spit in that glass, as much saliva as you can get, and let it sit. And you'll see what appears to be like jellyfish that are hanging in the glass after about 5 minutes. That's an indication that there's an elevated level of yeast. Now, a couple of other symptoms, and again, your viewers may want to tune into this. So if you're having the following symptoms: cravings for sweets. Yes. Check one. Tiredness, lethargy, bloating, acid reflux, yeast infections, bladder infections, urinary tract infections, various spots of dryness on your skin. These are all indicative of Candida albicans. And the thing about Candida or yeast is it's a precursor to diabetes. So it's very important that if someone has these symptoms, that they don't ignore them. So what do we do about it? Well, there's a couple of different things. One of the things that we highly recommend is this product. It's called a Pure Essential. This is a soluble fiber. Soluble fibers work differently than the traditional fibers that you might see in the store, where you've got some kind of constipation and you take the fiber and then hopefully the next morning it goes away. Well, this is a soluble fiber. So what that means is it's a clear, fine powder. There's no taste. There's no real texture to it. It's very fine. It disappears in water or tea or whatever you put it in.
I would like to say something for our viewers. I'm actually on this, and what I've noticed, Oscar, is my cravings for sweets not what it used to be. Me being tired, not what it used to be. Like I have to be honest, I haven't noticed much when it comes to, the intestinal.
Well, I have, because I've taken as well, and I've noticed, my food seems to go down and digest through my system a lot easier than it used to, because I would kind of sometimes have dinner and have that kind of acid reflux a few hours later, and I feel like I have to reposition myself when I'm sleeping, just so, and when I feel like my food's coming up, I'm like, okay, I don't know if it's acid reflux or if it's maybe symptoms of me beginning to get it because my father has it. And so I don't know if that was something that, I could get from, just my food just not digesting properly.
Mm-hmm. So you've noticed a little bit of difference there.
I've noticed a lot. I haven't had any problems.
Perfect. I love to hear that. I'm so glad to hear that, because really these are some of the concerns a lot of women have. Another thing is there's constipation issues that often will take place. So generally speaking, what this does is it's going to extract or pull some of the toxins from the blood, specifically lower the blood sugars, the triglycerides. It starts to pull those back in, gets into the intestinal tract, and then you defecate it out. So some people will notice larger movements, other people will notice easier movements, and like you were saying, some of the cravings for sweets go away because some of the parasites that live on refined sugars in the body are now being eliminated. So you're bringing down the population of the parasites, and that's what an anti-fungal, antitoxic program does. It detoxes the body. So we recommend a tablespoon or two of this, one in the morning, one at night. You'll notice that the movements continue to increase, but you'll also notice that you're feeling better overall.
So would this be an ideal product for maybe someone who's diabetic, as far as pulling the sugar out of the blood?
Absolutely. I strongly recommend it. I'm also a certified wellness practitioner and consultant, and I recommend it to all of our clients that have diabetes because my sister is one of them. She was a prime example of someone whose numbers were always above 100. When she started taking it, they've been below 100, and that's been her personal experience. So she's taking lessons now. I don't want to make any claims that it's going to replace it.
Right.
And I also want to say that you should consult with your physician,
right,
because that is, we cannot make any claims that this cures any type of blood sugar issues. We can say, though, that through people's experiences, that they have seen some significant improvements, and it's a support for those who are looking for a way to bring down blood sugars and detox their body. Now this actually is accompanied by another, which I also strongly recommend. This is an essential enzyme, or enzyme essentials. An essential enzyme basically has a full scope, or what we call a full spectrum of enzymes in it. So if you read this label, you'll see catalase, lipase, amylase, protease. All these different laces are different things. Not shoelaces, right? But all these different components are actually designed to break down the starches, the proteins, the sugars, the fibers, all the different elements that you have. A lot of times when someone finds an enzyme in the store, it'll have, let's say, papain or bromelain. That's papaya or pineapple. Those are both great enzymes, but they're one spectrum. You need a full spectrum, because if you happen to be eating fruit, then it'll be great to break down with papain. But if you're eating a roast beef sandwich,
right,
it's not going to do much. Whereas with this, it's going to break down the components that you're eating. So you take 2 capsules. It's a capsule in a capsule form. You take 2 capsules after each meal. It'll break down the components that you've eaten so that your body can properly digest them. It'll help to separate the good stuff from the bad stuff, because there's a lot of artificial things, as you know, in foods today. Preservatives, stabilizers, expanders, and all these things like MSG, high fructose corn syrup, and these things are designed to get us addicted to food. Really, food today is not food. It's food-like substances. When you go, I'm not kidding. You can go and you can look at what looks like a hamburger, smells like a hamburger.
and not really a hamburger.
It's not a hamburger. And we've heard about that from certain taco companies, and the thing they were putting in, they're calling meat. It was a powder that they mixed water in, and you just mixed it up, and it was a paste. And the paste tasted like meat and had a similar consistency, and that's what was being used.
See, that's why everybody's wanting gluten-free.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
what exactly is gluten?
Well, gluten is a component. It's found in a lot of things like breads, pastas, different starches. The thing about gluten is, if someone has a gluten intolerance, it affects their ability to digest their foods. So you are not able to break down and process food. So it will cause cramping, bloating, stomach upsets, all kinds of issues. If someone has Crohn's disease, if they have diverticulitis, if they have a number of different gastrointestinal issues, you're going to have a problem generally with heavy gluten-based products, or with oily fried foods especially. Those things are going to affect the body, because when you eat something, and I like to use the analogy just to touch on nutrition for a moment. Let's say you had a piece of fried chicken on the table and you left it there for 2 weeks. And then let's say you had a banana and you left it there for 2 weeks. What would the difference be between the banana and the piece of chicken?
The chicken would smell.
Precisely. The chicken would not only smell, but the chicken would also still essentially be in its same form.
Right.
But if you look at that banana, what happens to the banana?
Black.
It's black. It flattens out usually, and it's what you might call rotted or decayed, right? Well, you know why it does that? Because the banana contains natural enzymes that break it down. See, when we eat fruits and vegetables, they are sustaining us because they contain the very enzymes that are necessary to digest them. On the other hand, when you have a piece of fried chicken, it'll still look like a piece of fried chicken 2 weeks later. And just imagine that being in your body and sitting in your body for weeks and weeks. And then what happens is you pile more on there, because there's the pizza and there's the extra cheese and there's this. the intestinal tract distends. And that's why, especially with men, we have that rock hard round belly. It's rock hard
belly.
because, right.
That's what we call it.
Oh yeah. And it gets to a point where it's solid.
Right.
And you're wondering, well, is that a stomach? No, your stomach is right up beneath your heart. So your stomach is up here.
Right.
Under here is intestine that's distended. And that's where mucus plugs develop. That's where all of this fecal matter sits until you start doing a cleansing. So that's very, very important if someone really wants to get healthy.
Yeah, because I hear that your intestines are only supposed to be like 9 pounds or something like that. And the average American is like 20-something pounds.
20 to 30 pounds, and by the time you're in your 40s, it's going to be somewhere in the 50s, maybe even to a greater extent. You could have 40 to 50 pounds of undigested fat sitting in the intestine. So there's all sorts of issues that we have when someone eats a lot of waste material on a regular basis. And again, all of that stays in your body. And that's why when we notice skin issues, when we notice tiredness, lethargy, all of that is a result of what's happening in the digestive tract on a regular basis.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
God.
70% of diseases start in the gut. Absolutely. If you look
I
at
can
most
believe that.
diseases, you will see that. Arthritis is common. Well, arthritis is an actual guttural problem, and most people would not think that, but it absolutely is. I remember having a gastroenterologist I talked to one time, and I don't claim to be a doctor, but he said he had arthritis, and he says, all right, tell me a little bit as a wellness practitioner what you believe arthritis is caused by. I said, well, sir, it's caused by your food that you're consuming. And he said, I'm a gastroenterologist, and you're going to tell me? I said, well, I appreciate the 30 plus years you spent in the industry, but here's what happens. When you're eating foods that your stomach cannot digest, after a while, your body is producing certain acids and certain toxins. They go to rest points in the joints. Your joints have synovial fluid. The synovial fluid actually can rupture. And when it ruptures and it leaks out of the cartilage that it's in, it calcifies that area, and that's the inflammation that causes arthritis.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Stop
So
right there. After this commercial break, Oscar's going to take us to a few demonstrations that we did at the Choose Hair Expo.
And we're back. Oscar, before we went to our break, I know I said I wanted to be the guinea pig and have you to read my sign.
sure.
So we're going to do that, and then we're going to go to some of the demonstrations you did at Mr. Chu's Multicultural Hair Expo.
Okay, certainly. So let's take a look.
Oh gosh, you got to give me a card.
Okay. Just stick that tongue out nice and blank for me. Yes.
Okay, here we
She's
go.
preparing. I'm scared.
No.
Ooh. Okay. Very good. And lift it for me. Poking it down a little bit more. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm seeing a couple of things. So.
I don't know about the ooh. Oh no, I'm a little scared. Hold on, I'm a little
Okay,
scared. I don't know.
alright.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. First of all, let me say that the tongue is a roadmap to your digestive system. That's really what we see with the tongue. And what I am seeing is that you do have some levels of yeast that are high. I'm seeing a white coating on the tongue. That white coating is indicative of the fact that there's elevated levels of candida in the system. So you may have, like you mentioned, the cravings for sweets.
Oh yes.
And it's not your imagination, because bacteria that causes candida lives on refined sugars.
Okay.
So that's what creates the urge. I'm also seeing a little bit of intestinal blockage there as well, which indicates that there could be some intestinal upset, acid reflux. Sometimes there's bloating associated with that, constipation possibly at times, and I'm not seeing it as much as perhaps before. But
It's gotten better. I think it's gotten better since I've been taking the products. But I mean, like I said, when my food digests now, I don't have the problem of feeling like it's acid reflux. I'm not as tired as I used to be.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm seeing that when I asked you to lift your tongue up, what I'm looking for is to see if there's glue. the vein under there. And everyone will say, oh, everyone's tongue is like that. But if you look at mine,
it's not blue.
Oh, wow.
it's not blue. And the reason it's not blue is because if it is blue, that's an indication that there's a circulation issue. And so your circulation can be restricted, and you might get cold hands, cold feet, tingling in your hands.
I get that when I wake up in the morning.
all the time. Now, you did mine during a commercial break.
Yes.
And you saw the blue under my tongue.
I did.
Let me tell you what annoys me most when I work out. I'm working out, I'm walking on the treadmill, I'm walking on the trail with T. My legs are itching. They're just itching like crazy. And I'm scratching and now they're red and okay, what's going on with that?
Well, what that itching is at the surface of your skin there are capillaries. And the capillaries are, you know, the smallest parts of the blood vessels. Well, blood is trying to force its way into those constricted capillaries, and that's causing the sensation of itching. And it can drive you crazy. But you know, the thing is that there's the only real solution for it is just to gradually continue your workouts. And what will happen is when your heart beats, it's literally pumping blood and forcing blood and opening or dilating those restricted capillaries and arteries. So as that occurs, your blood flow will naturally increase. Water intake, very, very important for blood increase. And then there are certain vitamins that you can take that will also facilitate blood increase. I like recommending a mega vitamin. In fact, just very briefly, this is a Superior Green. It's a powder, but it has all the A, B, C, D, E complexes, trace minerals, essential minerals, amino acids, all this full spectrum of stuff that your body needs to do what it needs to. You know, we were talking before the break about fried chicken. If someone eats beer, fried chicken, and pizza, and then they ask the body to make healthy cells out of that,
out of grease,
it's going to have a hard time doing it. But if you have broccoli, and you have spinach, and you have, you know, celery, and apples, and fruits, and then you say, make a healthy cell, the body goes, okay, I can work with this material, you know? So that's really the key. We have to look at our diet and our lifestyle. And there's another piece, and we could talk about this after the demonstrations if you like, but there's another piece which is the emotions, because I like to call it ESP. When I do seminars, which I do seminars at churches, at groups, and I welcome listeners that would like more information to invite me to come out. I love speaking about this stuff. But ESP stands for the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical. And this is the triad. This is really the three components that make up a healthy individual or an unhealthy individual. If you're imbalanced in any of those three areas, there could be problems.
I'm imbalanced.
Okay, so
I think I got emotional and spiritual down pat, but the
Yes.
physical, I have so much work to do because I'm tired. You know, I'm here, I'm there, we're running all over Houston, filming, and I don't want to work out. But I feel like if I'm doing that much, that's enough physical. Do I have to really do more?
And see, the difference between she and I, she loves to work out in the morning. I like to work out in the evening. She feels,
So
you know,
we can't go to the gym together because I'm like, T, come to the gym with me. She's like,
I get my
in
energy
the morning.
I get my energy in the morning. Something about once I work out, I get relaxed. And so if I do it in the morning, by the way, I have started, and I think, you know, my energy level is coming back, so I'm able to keep going. But when I first, you know, started out working out, trying to work out in the morning, I would be so tired. I would be so relaxed. I would come home and then take a shower and say, okay, I'm gonna lay down and take a nap. And next thing you know, it's 6 o'clock.
It's 6 in the morning.
So
when I work out in the morning, I'm ready.
Wow.
My day, I'm just ready to get started.
And I tend to be that way too. I work out early in the morning. You know, it's according to circadian rhythms. I mean, everybody's cycles are different. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. If it relaxes you and you go to sleep afterwards, you know, for some people, the adrenaline kicks in, the endorphins kick in, and they're ready to go. In your case, melatonin might be kicking in, and the melatonin is what relaxes you and what eases you into a nice, comfortable sleep. So it depends. The average person, however, should not work out too close to bedtime because that tends to keep them awake. So it just depends, you know, on the individual. But you know, you talked about the demonstrations just a little while ago. there's a couple of demonstrations that we did at the show that were fabulous. I love the two candidates because we talked about two different things.
Yes.
We talked about the fact that the mind, like we were saying, the emotional, the spiritual, the ESP, the mind has a very powerful influence on your physicality. And it's your belief systems that shifts your physicality. And so we had the gentleman that we were doing that with, and basically we went against his belief systems. And we'll get a chance to see that in just a moment.
Definitely. And here's a clip of that demonstration.
We were talking earlier about what we call emotional causation and belief system. And Derek and I, we never met, correct? So I just met Derek, and I'm going to ask him to do something for me. I'm going to basically test his belief systems, okay? All right, so I'm going to ask you, and I'll ask you to hold the microphone. Your right hand in there? Okay. I'm going to ask you to put your right hand out in front of you. And I'm going to try to push it down, and you stop, okay? And while you're trying to stop, just say, my name is Derek. My name is Derek. All right? And that's your name. That's your name. Just keep saying that. So I'm going to try to, as hard as you can, just say, my name is Derek.
My name is Derek. Your name is Derek. My name is Derek.
Okay. I was really pushing this man. This man's a coach. He's very strong. And I could not move it. I'm serious. I really was trying. Okay, now we're going to ask you to shake it off or whatever. We're going to ask you to do it again. This time, go ahead and hold your arm out. Say, my name is Mary.
My name is Mary. My name is Mary.
Okay, all right. Now let's now really try to prove me wrong, Derek. Now come on, brother. You're strong. Let's try it one more time. My name is Mary. Go ahead.
My name is Mary.
That was an amazing demonstration.
Now, he didn't want to have his arm pushed out. You saw him, right? He was going to prove it, but he was strong.
Right.
I could not push his arm down that
And I
first
could
time.
tell he was really trying.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, oh my
Oh,
gosh,
yeah.
is this real? Is
Yes,
this real?
yes. But the key was that we went against the belief system, and as soon as you go against someone's belief system, when he said his name and it wasn't his name, immediately his belief shifted and it changed his energy just like that.
Because he couldn't focus.
Right.
He
Exactly.
couldn't, and that's just like, you know, when someone's telling a lie, I mean, they have to take all of their focus and just try to make someone believe it.
Exactly. But just imagine, that was 1 second that he was saying his name wasn't what it
Mary,
was.
right.
Now, when he said my name is Mary, he went up against his belief system. But imagine if on a regular basis in day-to-day life, we're going up against our belief system. Imagine if every day we're telling ourselves a lie, or we're lying to others, or we're feeling disingenuous in our lives, in our relationships, in our communication, in the occupation that we have. When you have a sustained, what you would call a lie in your own life, you're creating chronic illness because your body is physically compromised.
Wow. That's why they say once you tell a lie, you have to keep telling them.
Yeah. But it's a perpetuating, declining cycle for most people. Yeah. Now another thing, and this is the next demonstration. I thought this was neat too, because what we were doing there was we were showing that we as a physical being, we're energy-based. We're energy-based beings. And most people don't think of us as energy, but you know, if you touch someone, it's an exchange of energy. If you hug someone, it's an exchange of energy.
Yes.
I mean, we are literally energy-based beings that are in this physical body. And so in this next demonstration, what we do is I show this young lady how I could reverse her polarity without ever touching her. And it's not the power of suggestion, I can assure you. Reverse her polarity and weaken her, and then restore her polarity and strengthen her. And that's because the body has a rhythm, a natural cycle, an energy field that we can disrupt. And that's why sometimes you'll walk in and you'll say, boy, that person's giving me a really bad vibe.
Right.
It's not your imagination, it's your intuition that you can sense someone else's energy. And we're either attracted to other beings or we're repelled by other beings.
Oh, I have that. It's so strong.
Yeah.
But let's take a look at this demonstration.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just transfer energy into your body. But I want you to prove me wrong and embarrass me on camera. Okay? All right. So here's the first piece. I'm not going to touch you. But all I'm doing, you let your arms loose to your side. All I'm doing right now is moving energy through your system through what's called a meridian. Okay, now go ahead and hold your arms straight in front of you. Just do it. I'm going to try to push it down. Stop. Okay, that was a good amount of pressure, all right? Okay, relax that arm. Slow down. Okay, now, here's the interesting thing. We're going to your side again. No, to your side. Okay, now, I'm going to take her polarity. I'm not touching Now, you're going to hold your arm out in front of you. You're going to try to stop. You're not saying anything. Or you can. If I prove you wrong. You prove me wrong. All right. Okay. Why do you feel weak? Try it again. See that? Okay. Now what's just happened is I reversed her energy. Now, I'm going to put it back. Are you going to be walking around like this all day? There we go.
I don't want to say yes. Hey, so many sides.
See some other side. Now go ahead and hold your arm out again. Right, stop. You're back. Okay. So that's an energy test. And what we just did was we moved her energy from one area to another.
That was so amazing.
Now, wasn't that interesting?
I wouldn't have believed it had I not been like that.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things that's important to mention, I don't know these people, so that was not. I mean, we picked her randomly.
People,
exactly.
Right.
And the key is you can do that with almost anyone, as long as you understand how to focus your own energy. And if you study the Eastern arts and practices, these are the lagoon points, and the lagoon points are where you can focus your energy field to actually move people along. And you've seen reflexology, massage therapy, you've seen Reiki. All of these are energy-based processes. And you can actually shift someone's energy either in a positive way or a negative way.
Really?
Yeah.
So would that kind of go with the whole reflexology? They say you can hit a certain point in your foot and get a headache to stop, or your sinuses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are 7,000 nerve endings in the feet. Each correspond to a part of your body. And you can hit certain components, certain parts of your feet that will affect your gastrointestinal tract. It'll affect your eyesight, your ears, your hearing, every single component. I remember getting reflexology done one time, and the lady touched a part of my foot, and my shoulder started flickering.
Wow.
And she said, and I said, "What are you doing right now?" And she said, "Touching your left shoulder." And I was like, "Wow."
Wow.
And,
I think I need to find me a reflexologist.
well, I happen to have connections with some of the best reflexologists in the country, and they happen to be in the Houston area, because a lady from Wales, from England, one of the founders of the science of modern reflexology, which they even use on the royal family in Europe, actually is based right in North Houston. I've done several TV shows on the subject. In fact, Good Morning. I was on Good Morning Houston. I was on Good Morning Houston doing a show about reflexology just a few years ago. Yeah. So it's something that absolutely works, and it's something that is amazing to behold. And what you just saw in the demonstration was an energy demonstration. Now, going back to something we talked about a little bit earlier, there's an emotional connection with every physical ailment that we might have. So different things correspond to different situations. So do you all have anyone that you know of that is having any health issues or physical issues?
My mom.
Your mom. What is she getting?
In January she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. She's never smoked. She's never been sick. And it kind of started last July with a cough. And, she would go to the doctor and they would say, "Oh, it's just a cough, let's give you some antibiotics and you should be fine." Well, as the year progressed, you know, she would notice around the holidays when she would like to dance around the holidays that she was becoming short of breath. So then she said, okay, you know, I really need to get this checked out because, you know, I've never been short of breath. And so they found, I guess, a tumor on her right side. And, you know, at that point, I guess it wasn't detected until it was a 4. And she had the fluid and everything, and so they've just been going through her treatments.
Wow, wow, wow. Well, you know, it's kind of interesting when you talk about the lungs. The lungs is symbolic in the body of taking in or accepting experiences and relationships. When there's a resistance to or conflict in a relationship, a lot of times it'll cause that as an issue. Sometimes when people have sinus irritation, it's an indication that someone close to them is irritating them. And when there's an issue with the lungs, it has to do. So, guilty as charged.
Oh, wow.
So
everybody irritates me.
apparently you got chronic sinus issues. Okay. But if you think about the causes, yes, I'm not saying that there isn't pollen in the air. I'm not saying that there isn't asbestos in buildings. You know, there are things like that. But you know, the reality is that cancers, and I'm sorry to hear about your mom, but cancers are floating around in our body. Cancer cells are always in everyone's body. As we speak, we have cancer cells floating around. So why don't we have cancer? Well, because the cancer cell has to find a proper area to host and to multiply. And depending on what's happening with our emotions, those cells that are floating around our body can find an area of weakness. And when it settles in that area of weakness, for an example, in your mother's lungs, because of how she was taking in life, was she having any problems with relationships?
No. She and my dad, they've been together 49 years. You know, they take care of each other. Our family is always, we're always generally happy. But my nephew, my new grandson, he's autistic, or he shows signs of autism, you would say that. And he's almost 6, but he still doesn't speak. So, she just really worries about him because, at this age, when a child can't verbally explain what's going on, a lot of people take advantage of that. Right. And so it's not that, she just wants him to talk. She just wants him to be able to speak so that, if something's going on, he won't be so frustrated. Right. And so, she doesn't say it bothers her, but I know it bothers her so much. Right. Because he didn't start walking until a couple of years ago. Wow. So, his delays in his
developmental issues.
And his development.
But you mentioned the right lung, and the right is the male side. When you have issues, if it's on the left side of the body, it's the female side. If it's on the right side of the body, it's the male side. And sometimes it's on both sides of the body. And sometimes it metastasizes very quickly. And I spoke with a lady that had a double mastectomy, and that was the case. She had problems with her own self-esteem and her perception of herself as a female. She had problems with an ex-husband who hurt her severely, and she held on to the hurt. She held on to the anger, and it manifested in this cancer. So we really, if we tune into the body, it tells us certain things. I remember having a friend of mine that had a sty in his eye, and I said, what's he said, oh, I've got this, I don't know, it just came out of nowhere. And I said, well, generally, when you have eye problems, and a sty has to do with how you're viewing something in your life at this moment in time. So there's something that must have upset you, and the way you're seeing it may not be the correct way, but it's the way you're perceiving it. And he said, that is so weird. And he told me the experience of how he was having a problem with his wife, and they had this terrible argument, and it came out of nowhere, at least in his mind. I said, it didn't come out of nowhere, it came out of your body. If you wake up and you have a stiff neck, and all of us have had that, and we immediately say, well, I slept wrong last night.
Right.
And that may very well be possible. But is it possible that you might have had an argument or a disagreement with someone the day before, and you could not see their point of view? Because if you cannot see their point of view, then that causes some difficulty.
You know what? Now that you say that, when I was married, I used to have a stiff neck all the time. But I just, I wrote it off as just stressed out. I need to get out of this marriage. This marriage is killing me,
And I noticed you were pointing to your right side. That's the male side.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh, like all of this would just hurt so much. And I get a massage, and then like as they're massaging like certain pressure points, I get a headache. And they're like, no, it's not a headache, it's the release of the pressure or the tension or something. I'm like, okay, but my head is hurting. Okay, it's a headache to me.
Yes.
Oh,
That
wow.
that is your either desire, unwillingness to accept the ex-husband's point of view and his perspective on it.
Because it was never right.
It was never
But
right.
okay.
That's right.
Well, let me ask you this.
Now his left side is it right? Just kidding.
Okay, so like you're saying, with the stiffness, what about the eye twitching? Because, I notice, sometimes when I'm like really, really stressed out, my eye will twitch. I'm just like, what's going on? It's just, I have
Now,
no control
we
whatsoever.
do have to watch that because some of that could be blood pressure related.
Okay.
Some of that could be things related to the blood pressure that's happening. A lot of times, again, eyes represent how we're viewing something at a certain time. The twitching has to do with a failure to accept or unwillingness to accept, and so sometimes that's what it's indicative of.
She suffers with that. She don't like to accept a lot of things. And we walk around on eggshells. We're like, okay, we don't want to upset T. She's not going to accept that, but she's doing a lot better.
Doing better.
I'm trying, my eyes not twitching.
Yeah, it's not twitching. That's good, but that's usually what it has to do with, and so again. And it's a fascinating subject. You could almost spend all day on this because everything means something. And I think one of the examples that a lot of people relate to, and your viewers may relate to, is thyroid issues. A lot of women suffer with thyroid problems, or someone who has a thyroid issue. Well, the thyroid represents this part of your thinking that says, when is it going to be my turn? When do I get a chance to do the things I want to do? And for a lot of women that are in their 40s and 50s, they're having an issue, or 30s, okay, they're having an issue with the fact that they've raised children, they've gone through a marriage, or maybe two, and they've always given, they've been providers, and they never had a chance for themselves to prosper, to grow, to expand, to enjoy the things that give them creative satisfaction. And that can cause a thyroid issue. So we have to listen to our inner dialogue. We have to listen to our self-talk. And then we have to adjust that self-talk. And we can do that through affirmations. Writing down something that you know is diametrically opposed to the emotion that's dominant in your inner voice. And for an example, something as simple as, I love and I approve of myself, and life is opening up in wonderful ways for me. And you say that over and over again. And what it starts to do is this transformative thinking. It starts to shift the way that we perceive our current circumstances. And when our self-talk changes, first you change the inner and then the outer.
I need you to write that on the back of a few
I'm
cards.
going to tell myself that today when I leave and every day
like
after.
10 times a day.
Yes. Yeah, and it's okay to put it on a mirror or do whatever you need to do.
definitely.
But as you say it over and over again, you come to accept it. And a lot of times, even with weight loss, I've had clients that have struggled with weight loss because they've never slayed the inner demon. And the inner demon sometimes has to do with feelings of vulnerability, feelings of wanting to pad themselves so that they can avoid the potential harm, the hurt that's outside. And that hurt might have taken place when they were a 5 or 10-year-old little girl or a little boy, but it's still with them today because they haven't released it. And that's all a part of the process. So it's an evolution of thinking that changes us, that's transformative, that changes us internally and then eventually externally.
So basically for my weight loss, I just need to think different.
And avoid the cake.
Avoid that too. I mean, that was kind of hard.
Don't
but
feed it to the candy.
I'm trying not to. I'm trying not to let it take over my life.
Yes. But the thing about food is it's the hardest thing. I used to weigh 265 pounds. And that was more than 10 years ago. But losing the weight also had to do with changing the thinking and associating different things. For an example, like we were joking about, let's say chocolate cake. I happen to love ice cream. I still love ice cream. But I have to recognize that if I overindulge in something like that I love, there's a cause and effect relationship,
Right.
this is the consequences to having that. And I used to have the acid reflux, and it was really bad when I ate ice cream for some reason.
Mine too.
Really. And so you have to say to yourself, okay, this is causing this problem, so I have to associate more pleasure with the feeling of being healthy and strong. And so one of the things I love to do, and in fact it's a program that I hope we'll feature in a future show, is I'm a salsa dancer. I love salsa dancing.
Wow.
You know,
Hold on, he put me
we're
on
gonna
the
have you
spot
both
at the
dance.
expo. Hold on, he put me on the spot. He didn't think I had moves.
Yeah.
But I shocked you.
You did fabulous, by
I
the way.
shocked
You
you.
absolutely
I can
did.
salsa
I was
dance.
impressed. I was impressed because people will see me and they'll say, well, you know, what do you know about salsa? But I always tell people I'm a Spanish guy that looks like a black guy that talks like a white guy. So I've got all the bases covered, you know. But salsa dancing for me is cathartic, but it's also great cardiovascular. And when you start moving and you start exchanging energy, you know, I'd like to talk about how that is like a perfect metaphor for couples and for relationships. Because when you join as a couple and you dance and you're dancing, and it doesn't have to be salsa, it can be any form of couple dance. It's a relationship that you establish with somebody where you have to read and sense each other's moves and motions.
Exactly.
And there's a synergy that's created around that. So it's a fascinating subject, and it's something that we could certainly delve into. But the emotions, the physical well-being, and the spiritual. And just to touch on the spiritual, I'm not necessarily saying someone has to have a certain religious affiliation. Your spirituality has to do with your relationship with yourself. And that's what we were talking about as it pertained to getting the inner child to accept who you are. It's your relationship with yourself, and then your relationship with your higher power. And your higher power could be whatever you want to call that higher power. It can be God for some people, or it can be self for other people, or it can be nature. And we don't have to put a judgment on it, but just understand that there is some relationship outside of ourselves that we have to establish so that we can create a balance and a synergy in our lives.
Wow, that is amazing. It has been amazing having you here on the show today.
Thank
I have learned
Don't
so
go
much.
away. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Oscar, it has been phenomenal having you here today. I don't even, words can't even explain some of the things that I've learned, and you know, just how to approach things and how to approach life now. Tell us how we can get in touch with you if any of our viewers want to.
Absolutely. You can do it a couple of different ways. We talked about the hair products. If you go to hairhealth.com, hairhealth.com is a resource for information. You can find out all sorts of things about different hair products, different nutritional products, just different things that really can help women to further their hair health. And they can order any of the products that we talked about on the show today. If you'd like, you can give us a call too, 281-744-0446. I'll repeat that, that's 281-744-0446. And if you do that, you can reach me directly. I oftentimes will do seminars. We love to come out and talk to groups. We have special programs that we do where we can focus on specific things. I know in the African American community, we talked about health, you know, high blood pressure, diabetes, you know, these are serious problems. And you mentioned your nephew with autism. You know, autistic children are challenged in many ways, but believe it or not, there are foods that they can eat and supplements that they can take. For an example, one of the supplements that we often recommend for autism is the omegas. If they get on omega-3 in particular, it actually will help with their progression.
Really?
And you know, we want to make sure it's mercury-free and lead-free, so it's a quality omega, because there's a lot of cheap knockoffs out there.
Right. I take the one from the Whole Food store, it's the omega 369.
I would prefer to suggest only 3, because if you take omega 6 and 9, the thing most people don't realize is 6 and 9 are already in our foods. When you fry an egg, the egg is being fried in oil, and that's 6 right there. So we already have an abundance of 6 and 9. What we don't get a lot of is 3. So if we're eating avocados, if we're eating fish, you know, especially things like salmon, you'll get a lot more omega-3s from that. But when you have other oils, the saturated oils and all of that, you get plenty of 6 and 9. It's better to just isolate it to omega-3.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So But your viewers are welcome to give us a call. We have all sorts of resources and information that we can share with them. And really, at our hair show that we did here in Louisiana, we had a wonderful opportunity to meet individuals that were part of an organization that I think has a worthy cause, BOBSA. And the BOBSA group is Black-Owned Beauty Supply Association. And they're really striving to help us to bring monies back to the African American communities, because many people are making lots of money on hair products.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
But unfortunately, not always the people that have our best interests in mind. So that's something that we want to keep in mind as well.
Wow, that's amazing. And also, you can reach us on the T at thethouston.com. Again, that's thethouston.com. You can follow us on Twitter at thethouston and on Facebook at thethouston. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, Oscar, we would love to say thank you for being on the show, because this was very, very informative.
Thank you both so much for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you all. You are delightful. You're a
And you
gem.
are too.
Thank you.